Hello and welcome to Upstack America's Oracle EBS Financials Functional Training. My name is Bob and I'm the lead senior consultant for Upstack America. And with me today I have Victor, who is also a senior consultant. And today we are handling General Ledger Lesson 46. And Victor, please walk us through.
Thank you, Bob, for the introduction, and welcome to this lesson in our Oracle Financials Functional Training Series. In this lesson, we are going to stay on track with our topic of FSG reporting, and we're still looking at how to use the FSG control value. We have already looked at how to use the control value for creating reports with budget amounts and reports with a constant period of interest. And in this lesson, we are going to look at how control value can be used to customize reports by showing various currency amounts, including functional amounts, entered amounts, translated amounts, and start currency amounts. So just to start off, we already know what a report that is showing functional amounts would look like. Why? Because those are the reports that we have been doing. So when you don't specify to Oracle using control value any currency amount, then the default is functional amount. So we really don't need to learn anything about entering functional currency amounts using the control value, because we don't need it, and whatever we have been doing, those have been functional amounts. They are entered in the functional currency of our ledger, which is US dollars. However, we do need to look at how the FSG control value can be used to enter these other currency amounts, the entered amounts, the translated, and the start. Now, of course, we should already be familiar with each of these, not by, and even you can tell by the names what these currency amounts mean, but we are going to look at each of them. So let's start with start amounts. So we can create FSG reports which show start amounts for the whole report, or maybe in some columns. And where do start amounts come from? We have already looked at in our previous lessons in this series. We have seen how to use start currency. We know how to enter start journals and also mixed journals. Okay, so if this is something that you feel you have forgotten, you can refamiliarize yourself with start currency. There's a, I believe there are lessons. There's a lesson for that we have. But just as a refresher, we know that one way we enter start amounts is by start journals. Okay, so we create accounts in our value set to hold statistical information. It can be things like number of employees, or any other kind of information that's non-financial that a company would like to keep track of. The other way to enter start information is through mixed journals, where we assign units of measure to a particular account. So maybe if we have an account in our value set, such as that we have an account that shows maybe a particular revenue, okay, and this revenue, sales revenue, we can assign a unit of measure. So if it is a particular item we are selling, maybe we are selling houses or apartments, we want to indicate that besides having used this account, we also, the number of units that were sold, this number of units. So maybe we sold 10 apartments or something like that, okay? So these are all concepts that we should be familiar with. And so what we are trying to say here is that because these are this is information that we can enter in our ledger, then we can create reports to show this kind of information on the reports, and we will see how to use the control value. So it's not any different from the other things we've used the control value to show. So we just need to indicate in our column set that this column set is going to have this particular control value, and before we run the report, we indicate that the currency amounts we want to show this for is start currency. Okay. Let's look at what entered amounts are also. So we can also produce reports that show entered amounts. And what do we mean when we say entered amounts? So when we say entered amounts, the best way to think about it is think of foreign currency journals. So we are familiar with the topic of conversion because this is also something that we have looked at, and when you're looking at foreign currency. So when you're entering journals in GL, you either enter them in functional currency for your ledger, in our case that's US dollars, or you can enter foreign currency journals, okay, using any foreign currency you have enabled and for which you have exchange rate. Okay, so you, for example, in our case, we can enter journals in Kenya shillings, and those amounts are converted through the process of conversion into the functional currency, which is the US dollar. However, Oracle tracks balances for the amounts, foreign currency amounts which are entered. So while when we enter foreign currency journals, we know that they are converted to the functional currency. Okay, so Oracle accounts for those amounts in the functional currency, but it also tracks the amounts you've entered in the foreign currencies. Okay, so it will show you the amounts that you have entered. It will have balances for the amounts that you have entered in the foreign currency. So for example, in our case, if we have entered journals in Kenya shillings in our US dollar ledger, it will show us the amounts that we have entered in Kenya shillings separately. Okay, and so we can create reports that show these entered amounts for whatever accounts have been hit by the foreign currency journals. So that is basically what we mean when we say we can do entered amounts reporting, and we will use the control value in order to tell the system that the currency we want displayed in a certain column is the entered amounts in a particular currency. Finally, we have translated amounts. So for translated amounts, again, we are familiar with the topic of translation, which we covered when we were doing reporting currencies. Okay, so we can create reports that show translated balances instead of balances in the functional currency. Okay, so in the case of translation, what we are doing is we are converting all our balances into a foreign currency. Okay, remember how we do translation at the end of the period. So of course, in order to do translation, there are things that you need to do. You have to make sure that you maintain all the relevant exchange rates For translation, we need to maintain at least two kinds of exchange rate. We need the period end, and we need the period average, and in some cases we will also need to enter the historical rates. Okay, if we are going to use the historical rates to translate the amounts in our equity account. Okay, so once you do translation, then you have balances for your accounts maintained in whatever foreign currency it is that you did translation for. So if our functional currency is USD, and at the end of the period we do translation, we can do translation to Kenya shillings. Okay, so we'll have balances both in Kenya shillings and in our functional currency USD. So you can create reports which show translated amounts either on some columns or on all the columns if that is the requirement. And in order to do that, we also need to use the control value so that we can tell the system that in this column we want to see translated amounts and not functional amounts, which is the default. Okay. So in terms of multi-currency reporting, those are the four currency amounts we can have. Technically, we already know one, the functional, and so the new ones that we are learning are the entered amounts, the translated amounts, and the start amounts. Okay, so we are going to create reports which are going to show us how we do reporting for each of these types of currency amounts, and we are going to start with start amounts. Okay, so let's go to Oracle. Let me find my Mozilla. So let me log in. Now in our setup, we know we have some accounts for which we have assigned units of measure. Okay, we can check by following the navigation setup, then accounts. Let me see, setup accounts, then units. My plugin is acting up. So let me restart this. Okay, this is the screen that we wanted. Let's do a full query. Let's see what accounts we have here. So against account 4001, which is a revenue account, the unit of measure we have assigned is hectares, and the unit of measure we have assigned against account 4002 is number of units. Okay, so I believe this one has something to do with land, and this one has something to do with housing units. Okay, so what we can do is we can enter journals against these two accounts for a particular period, and then what we will do is we will run a report for that period, and in one of our columns, in our column set, we will indicate that we want to see the start amounts, okay, against these accounts, while we see normal financial activity for the other column. Okay, so let's start with entering some journals against those two accounts. So let's go to enter journals, new journal. We can call this FSG report report for start amounts, which is a weird name to give to a journal. Okay, so let's enter the lines, and yeah, I want this to be for October. That's the period we are going to run the report for, so that's fine. So let's enter the accounts. We know, let's do company 01. So one of the companies is 4001, so land sales. Okay, division, let's do industrial plants. Department 0000 for everything else. Now you can see, because we assigned units of measure for this account, when you're entering the journal, it's already indicated here, units of measure, hectares, and quantity. Okay, so this is a revenue account, so let's debit $1,000 to this, and let's say we sold 5 hectares 5 hectares of land for $1,000, and then let's balance this with cash. So division industrial plants 00, so same amount. And you can see, since we don't have units of measure against cash, then nothing is here. Okay, so you have to assign these units of measure in order to be able to enter mixed journals against an account. And you also have to set a profile option that enables you to enter mixed journals. Okay, and that is something we have discussed before. So let's enter another line against the other account that has units of measure, which we saw was 4002. Let's see what that is. Yeah, home sales. This will have to be a different division. So we can say single family homes, department 00, everything else 00. Same for this, we have number of units here. Okay, so let's debit this 5,000, and let's say here we have 10 single family homes. 001.1000 .102.00. Okay, so that will be the cash account. So sorry, we're supposed to debit cash and credit revenue. So that looks good. So when we run the report for October, and we indicate that we want to see start amounts for these two accounts for the period of October, the PTD, then we expect to see 10 and 5 against these two accounts, 4002 and 4001. Okay. But of course, we need to post this journal so that the balances can be hit. Okay, so we have entered start journal. So let's close that. So now what we need to do is go and design our report. Okay, so let's go to report, define, and let's go to column set. So let's design a new column set real quickly, and we're going to call it, so that one is going to show start amounts. Okay, so let's call it Maskani start amounts. Column set. And let's build the column set. So we are very familiar now with this page, this window. So the first column, we wanted to show PTD actuals, offset of 0. Let's add a new column, sequence 20. We also want this to show PTD actuals. Okay. Same period, offset, and we create default heading, right? So these are the headings that we are going to see. PTD actuals for both of them. This is going to produce the name of the period. We might want to people to know that what is being shown in this column here is start amounts. So we might want to add that in the heading. So we can add that. One way we can do it is just to hard code. Okay, so we can just say start amounts. Okay, or because we know that this column is going to have a control value. Okay, and we know with that control value we are going to tell Oracle that that control value represents that currency. Then we can use a macro and we can say and currency, and the control value we are going to give, which should be 1, right? Since 1 has not been used in this new column set that we are building. We can hard code that this is USD here, okay? But we don't have to do that. As long when we say that this is going to show that it starts, so and we are going to know that this automatically is going to be functional currency. If it was a different currency, then we would have shown, and it would have had a control value. Anyway, so let's assign a control value to this second column, column 20. So let's assign control value 1. Okay. So everything looks set, and we can save our column set. So we have this column set that we're going to use, Maskani start amounts column set. Now let's create a row set. Now we already have a row set that we can use, the one for the income statement. but let us create a new one that just shows all accounts without the multiple row definitions. For the one that we're using with the income statement, it has row definitions for revenue accounts, expense accounts, and then net income. So we don't want one that looks like that. We just want one that shows all the accounts. Okay, so we can call it Maskani all accounts Rosette. And when we define rows, we'll have the first row definition, and we'll just call it all accounts. Okay. Then we can do our account assignments. We can select our ledger here, Scani Group US, that's our primary ledger. We can select all accounts. So let's do all the way to this here are start accounts that we have. Let's not include them. So let's do everything from 00 through to 6,999 or just 6,000. The accounts that we have here. Okay. So let's start cash all the way through to 6,000. And let's expand. We don't want to do the total, okay, because it really doesn't make sense. You have asset accounts there, you have liability accounts, you have revenue accounts, expense. That total might not make much sense. So let's just expand, and we can see the activity for each account by itself, and not necessarily the total for all of them. Okay, so we're going to use E for the account. We can do it for one company or for all the companies. Let's do it for all the companies. So 001 through to the elimination company. You can leave it blank also, so it will just if you don't specify, then it will do reports for all the companies or all the balancing of segment values. So we can select OK there, right? And we can save our row set. So now all we need to do is run the report. So let's define the report. Okay. So we can give our report the name Maskani start amounts. Can give the same name to title and the description. Which row set do we want to use? Maskani all accounts. And the column set we want to use Maskani start amounts column set. Now remember we have control values for this, so just select control values here. Okay. Control value 1, the currency type is statistical, right? So whichever column has control value 1 should display statistical currency amounts for every account if that account has start amounts. Okay, so there are other accounts which are not going to have start amounts because we have not assigned units of measure against those accounts. Okay, and we also didn't include the actual start accounts in our value set here. All right, so we are only going to see our normal accounts. We are going to see all accounts balances for whatever period we are going to run in one column, and in the column which we showed is start, then we are going to see the start amounts for that period and only for the accounts which have units of measure assigned to them. Okay, so let's save that. And our report looks okay to run. So let's run the report. And we do want to run it for the period of October because that's when we entered our mixed journals and submit. So this is the request ID. Let's go to an SRS screen. And wait for the report to be completed. So looks like everything was completed properly. Let's see what the output is. Okay, so these are the only accounts which have activity for the period of October. Again, sadly, because of the layout of the report, we are not able to see the full account numbers, and like I promised, this is something that we are going to see. We are going to see how to edit these reports so that they are better displayed. And as Robert explained, you're probably not going to find anybody in the field asking you to use these reports because they're better reporting tools. So we are learning this, so that in the case that you need to do it, you know how to do it. But we have achieved what we wanted to do. So in this column, I am assuming this account here is cash because we have used cash a lot. So we can see the financial information. Okay. Now these two accounts are the ones that we entered mixed journals for. So this should be 4001 and this should be 4002. and you can see actually the amounts that we entered. Like I said, the amounts in brackets are credit amounts. The brackets is negative. So these are revenue accounts, all right? So we credited them with these amounts when we entered the mixed journals, and you can see now the units of measure, the start amounts. We had 5 hectares of land for the first account, and we had 10 units, 10 house units for the second account, okay? So this column is displaying start information. These accounts that have 0 amounts here, either they didn't have units of measure assigned against them, or if they do, then no activity was recorded in this period, okay? But we know from our case that we didn't assign units of measure against any of these other accounts. But our control value worked as it was supposed to. So that is how to use the FSG control value for start amounts reporting. The process is the same for all the other kinds of currency amounts. In terms of how we use the control value, all you need to do is tell Oracle that this is entered amounts and this is translated amounts, okay? So for translated amounts, of course, you have to do translation first. And for entered amounts, of course, you have to have foreign currency journals entered in a foreign currency. Then you can select that foreign currency and ask that amounts entered in that currency be displayed on a particular column. So we are going to do quick demonstrations for both of them, but in our next lesson, we don't need to do much, just need to do a quick example. We are going to take care of that in our next lesson as we head on over to the optional components, which will help us to make our reports much more user-friendly or legible. But Bob, unless you have something to add, that's a good place to end this lesson.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.